Soulless Dead, Brotherhood, Chapter 15. Medicine. The next day, we got up. In high spirits, we all met as we walked down the road towards the field where we got our jobs. We were all excited, and we all got divvied out into our groups. My class was the closest, and my father led us down to the old pharmacy. There we had a makeshift class with some tables from our school. We sat down in front of a whiteboard, and the doctors introduced themselves. One was a chiropractor, and the next was a pharmacist who explained to us the complicated world of medicine. We all dreaded that part because a lot of them had long names, and we had to learn different types of drugs. Thankfully, it was the ones that were the most common that we would be keeping an eye out for. But he said no drug is useless, so grab as much as you can. The third one was my father, who was going to be teaching us about field combat medicine, as he was a medic in the army. He also did a lot of surgeries, and so he'd be teaching us how to deal with open wounds, how to seal things up and stitch people. As he stood up there, he paused. God forbid you might have to sew someone up or dig a bullet out of someone. One of the guys stood up. "You aren't serious, are you?" "Well, the object of this class," my father said, "is that you guys use the skills that these teachers standing before you have in the event of a bad situation. Now, granted, a bad thing might not happen, but chances are the worst can happen. You have to understand that. Every single one of you. And that might mean digging a bullet out of your friend's arm or chest or gut. Now, really, what we're going to be teaching you, what I'm specifically going to be teaching you, is how to stabilize someone until the proper medical people can take care of them, like myself, or like the rest of the doctors up here, depending on the field. Your job is to stabilize and to make sure someone's okay." Everybody was a little bit relieved. The fourth final doctor stood up after my dad. He patted him on the back. He was quite a bit older than the rest of them, at least 20 years older than my dad, who was at least in his high 40s. "Hello, my name is Nathaniel Malkar." He was a doctor, one of those cliché doctors from India. He had kind eyes and a very kind demeanor. He clapped his hands and said, "Now, let's get down to business. I'll be acting as the senior dean of medicine here, for those of you who know. Daniel, you probably do." "That's right, Daniel. He probably does know. I talked to him a lot about it," my father said. It embarrassed me a little bit as I covered my face. My dad loved doing that, and the class thought it was hilarious. Now, Dr. Malkar said. "My job is going to be sure to make sure that I am going to be helping you guys take notes. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. This is a very difficult class, but you are the top in your class, so you are expected a lot of responsibility. Now, if you can't do this, understand we'll find you something else, but this is very important, and it needs to be taken seriously, ladies and gentlemen." We all knew what we were getting into, and they continued to encourage us the rest of the opening day. For the next few weeks, I spent learning as much as I could. To be honest, I was getting burnt out with all the information. I had already filled out 2 notebooks within those few weeks, and I was learning so much. The one that was really kicking my butt was pharmaceuticals and medicines. Dr. Malkar would regularly come over to my house because he became really close to my dad, James. He'd stay for dinner, and they would both coach me. At times, I would actually miss going out with my friends at 10 to the wall. They would heckle me about it, but they understood, and I tried to make as many excuses as I could. But to be honest, it was just because I was being overloaded. My dad had to leave because apparently someone got bit. It scared the whole class, but Dr. Malkar stayed with us for the rest of the class. As everyone filed out, I sat up my chair. I buried my hands right into my face. To be honest, I felt like crying. I was being overworked. No wonder people wash out of medical school. No wonder it's so freaking hard. We're getting an 8-year class getting crammed into our heads in less than a few weeks. I'm not even 20 yet. Dr. Malkar could see my distress, and he made his way over to me. He raised his hand but steadied it. Instead sat down next to me in one of the chairs. You know, if we need to talk, you can. I called him Dr. Nate on a regular basis, and I raised my face from my hands. My eyes were tearing up. I thought I was going to have a freaking panic attack. Daniel, what's wrong? Doc, I don't know if I can keep doing this. It's just too freaking tough. My dad's always on me to keep studying, and I know that it's important. I know that I'm fighting for my friends. But it's just so much. You know, I wasn't always a doctor. I was in pre-med school too. I was learning about all these things, and to be honest, I wanted to quit a couple times. Back when I lived in India, of course. Before I became a doctor, I was a nurse. I worked during Vietnam in the triage units down in Hanoi. Really? Yeah. I worked with the GIs. I saw a lot of crazy bad stuff in my life. A lot of things I wish I could forget. I was a volunteer. I didn't need to be there. I kept telling myself I'd get so angry when I'd see those choppers land with bullet holes all over them. They bring in young boys, not much older than you, riddled with bullet holes. I'd be wrist deep in guts for hours. It was a nightmare. He waved his hand out. I see a lot of them every day because sometimes I couldn't help them. The doctors there couldn't help them. But, like all things, we do it because we keep telling ourselves we have something to fight for. You just said you had your friends to fight for. Use that as a tool. Use that as something to motivate you, son. I wasn't always a doctor. I hated school. But I learned a lot. I kept fighting because I knew that what I was doing was noble. You have a gift. You're smart. You have a dad that cares. And I know that you seem like you're overloaded because this is not something any teenager should ever have to learn. To be honest, I wouldn't wish it on even the brattiest child. But that's not the world we live in now, is it? I wiped the tears from my eyes, I guess. I couldn't save my daughter. I know I'm not supposed to ask, Doctor, but how did she die? He sat back, folding his hands, pondering about it. He smiled for a moment and looked at me. Her name was Dahlia. We moved to America when she was about 10. California. Got a job and I did well. Her mother died in Calcutta in a car wreck. Bad roads in India, you know. I raised her by myself for a number of years. Man, there were times when I just wanted to give up. There were times when I was so stressed. I saw some messed up stuff there. But I always told myself, do it for her. Be strong for her because no one else is going to be. And that's what you need to tell yourself. Be strong for you. Be strong for your friends and the people that will rely on you. Be strong for the people that you haven't met yet. Learning medicine, learning how to be a medic, you think that it's just silly. And maybe you'll never be out there dealing with the dead, those horrible creatures. I took my Dahlia. Or maybe you'll just be out there and you'll find somebody who needs your help, and that's what matters. You have to fight to the bitter end. I stopped for a moment and pondered about what he said. I could feel the pain in his voice, but I could also see his conviction. But I had to ask, how did she die? His voice shuddered a little bit. But he looked over and said, she was bitten. We moved here to Kansas when she was in high school. I got a better job. When all this mess started, those savage creatures bitter. I tried for days. She really fought. She fought better than any of the other patients I had. Some would die in minutes. I kept her alive with every medicine, every technique, every skill I had in my repertoire. But it wasn't meant to be. But you know what? That didn't stop me from helping other people, and I did help other people. And that's what you need to do. She died and turned into one of those, and I took care of it. It'll be a while before I get through it, I'll be honest. It's a storm we gotta weather through. Doctor, I can't imagine. I'm so sorry. Don't be. No one lives forever. But I'll tell you what, if you've got the skill to help people live a little longer, then you'd be really selfish in my book to hide it. He sat up for a moment and reached into his belt. He pulled out a long green package. It was made of cloth. It had the USA stamp on it. I got this back when I was volunteering in Vietnam. It's a field medical kit. Some of the tools have been replaced over time, but I think you could use it. It was a good luck charm for me. A lot of the hospitals wouldn't let me use it back when I was doing medicine here in town, but I always kept it with me, just in case. You should too. Doctor, I can't take this, I said to him. It wouldn't be right. I mean, it's yours. It's your good luck charm. Look, I've gotten to know you and your father. Come over for wonderful meals, and I've gotten to know you. And I know you're stressed. I know this is hard. But you gotta do it for what you believe in. Like your dad said, God forbid something bad happens. It's going to. Something tough is gonna come in your way in your life. That is one of the most important guarantees of your life to come to terms with. With this medical kit, I hope that you make a difference. I hope that this gift does something for somebody in your life. It should. He stood up and began to walk away. Daniel, you need to hold tight to what you believe in. Think about it. What matters? You don't have to say it out loud, but just remember what you're fighting for. I couldn't save my daughter. And for a long time, I couldn't come to terms with it. I'm still fighting today. But if I can save a few people, or someone else's daughter, or someone I love or have grown to care about, my goodness, that's all that matters. He walked his way out of the class, and I sat there for a moment looking at it, contemplating what he said. Maybe I was being a little selfish, and I was putting my convictions and my problems before the real problem. What was really important. I grabbed the bag and I made my way out of the class, stuffing it into my backpack. Remembering what he said, it motivated me. It made me feel stronger. Normally I don't just turn a dime on one of those punny pep talks, but he was right. I had to remember this wasn't about me. I remembered all the times that we practiced outside of this. Nothing worth doing is ever done easy. I just muttered that as I made my way to the wall. It was a cold night out. Fall was upon us. There was frost on the grass, and it was unseasonably cold, and the sleet had started. We sat there, and the guys were huddled around it with little blankets over them. Each one of them looked exhausted. Logan had a bunch of soot. Jake had some electrical tape wrapped around his fingers. Dawson smelled of deer urine and had a coonskin cap on. It looked fairly hastily put together. He told us about how he caught it today. He laughed and he said, "No, I didn't really do it. It was made for me." We shot the bull for a while and we looked out the wall, hoping to see a light, but we didn't. We could see our breath before we could see anything else out there, and it was pitch black. The full moon was hidden by a lot of clouds, and the sleet was really starting to come down, and we decided to call it an early night. Despite Logan's protests, we couldn't afford to get sick, and being our resident little doctor, I had to protest it. We said our goodbyes, and me and Jake made our way back to our house. He went to bed pretty early, and my dad had set up a little bit of a stove in the house after renovating. He wasn't home tonight, as he and Dr. McCarr were called to help out at the medical facility. People were starting to get the flu. I sat at my bed with my arm extended up towards the ceiling, holding this little package of knives and scissors and all sorts of medical supplies. I kept hearing his words. Maybe I shouldn't be so selfish. With fall setting in, maybe I really needed to really buckle down and fight this. I'm no good to anybody if I just quit. And in this world, when you quit, you lose your usefulness. I just need to stay strong. I need to keep my friends in mind. I need to think about other people. And maybe I'm gonna meet somebody down the road that's gonna need my help. Yeah, I thought to myself, Dr. Dan. I laughed a little bit because, honestly, being called a doctor at my age was a little silly. But I knew that if I didn't learn any of this, I'd be letting my friends down, for sure. Because I knew that they would be busting their tails in their classes, too. I gotta stay strong. After getting someone like this, I can't disappoint him. I gotta learn my medicine. I gotta stay tough. I gotta get these demons out of my mind. I got a lot to sleep on.